Does an unsettling sense sometimes tell you that while you readily identified the flaws in others, a peculiar blind spot prevents you from confronting certain unacceptable behaviors within your self patterns that subtly undermine your well-being, erode your relationships, and hinder your growth? This uncomfortable question slices through the comforting fictions we often construct around our own virtue, demanding a radical self-assessment. Carl Jung, with his profound understanding of the human psyche, recognized that the most insidious self-sabotage often springs not from external adversaries, but from our own unintegrated shadow, particularly the behaviors we tolerate in ourselves that we would never accept in others. Society, prone to self-righteous judgment of external faults, frequently overlooks the far more pervasive and debilitating dangers of internal hypocrisies and unexamined self-indulgence, which silently fester and prevent authentic self-mastery. To remain oblivious to these internal inconsistencies, to attribute all personal struggles to external forces, is a deeply perilous path that ultimately prevents genuine healing and sustained personal evolution. You may find yourself battling recurring cycles of frustration, regret, or stagnation despite your best intentions, sensing that an invisible force within you sabotages your efforts towards positive change. This troubling repetition, the feeling that you are stuck in patterns you know are detrimental, is often your deepest intuition signaling the presence of these unacceptable behaviors you tolerate in yourself. This video is not an accusation. It is an immersive journey into the most treacherous psychological territories within your own mind, a practical manual to identify, interpret, and ultimately transcend these hidden perils to liberate yourself. Prepare yourself for the wisdom you are about to receive. Promises a transformative unveiling of your inner landscape and the true path to psychological integrity and self-sovereignty. The first principle we must grasp, often obscured by self-justification, is the principle of the shadow's permissive zone. This dictates that certain unacceptable behaviors become tolerated within us because they reside in a permissive zone of the shadow areas we consciously or unconsciously deem exempt from our usual moral or ethical standards, perhaps due to past trauma, unexamined privileges, or a deep-seated fear of confronting our own imperfections. This is not simply a bad habit. It is a hidden aspect of our being that we implicitly grant permission to operate, even when its effects are detrimental to ourselves and others. This tolerance allows the shadow to subtly dictate our actions, undermining our conscious values. This insidious principle connects intimately with Jung's central concept of the shadow, particularly its potential for self-deception when unacknowledged. When we refuse to hold ourselves to the same standards we hold others, we create an internal double standard that leads to hypocrisy and psychological fragmentation. Consider the ancient Greek concept of a tragic flaw, or hamartia, which often leads a hero to their downfall. This flaw is not always overt villainy, but often a tolerated blind spot, an unexamined indulgence that the hero, despite their virtues, implicitly allows themselves. This permitted flaw, deeply rooted within, becomes the autonomous force that steers them towards their inevitable tragedy, demonstrating the profound peril of unintegrated psychological permissions. In the contemporary landscape, this principle manifests with chilling clarity. Someone might frequently complain about others' lack of punctuality, yet consistently be late themselves, tolerating their own tardiness in a way they would never accept from others. An individual might harshly judge gossip in their social circles, yet regularly engage in it, creating a permissive zone for this behavior within their own communication patterns. even in seemingly minor daily choices, a persistent pattern of overindulgence in food, procrastination on important tasks, or excessive screen time, which would be harshly judged in others, is implicitly tolerated in oneself, leading to stagnation and self-sabotage. To truly identify this dangerous internal behavior, pay rigorous attention to moments when you find yourself judging others for a behavior that you, too, sometimes exhibit. Ask, am I holding myself to a different standard than I hold them? What hidden permission have I granted this behavior within myself? Begin to consciously challenge these permissive zones, bringing them into the light of conscious awareness. This disciplined self-observation is the first step in dismantling the shadow's hidden influence and reclaiming your personal integrity. The second shadow principle, often creating immense suffering and relational damage, is the principle of projected insecurity as aggression. This posits that certain unacceptable behaviors, particularly those involving passive aggression, subtle undermining, or veiled hostility, stem from our own unacknowledged insecurities, fears of inadequacy, or suppressed anger. Rather than confronting these vulnerabilities directly, we unconsciously project them as subtle acts of aggression or control onto others, or even subtly towards ourselves, creating a destructive dynamic that erodes trust and poisons relationships, leaving us isolated and misunderstood. This principle directly relates to Jung's core concept of projection, particularly the inferior function or the disowned shadow of weakness. When we refuse to own our own insecurities, they often manifest as outward hostility or manipulative behaviors. Recall the archetype of the trickster when it operates. From a malevolent shadow, using subtle sabotage and veiled attacks to compensate for an underlying sense of powerlessness or envy. In the court of the Borgias, for example, insidious poisons and subtle political maneuvers were far more dangerous than overt warfare, often stemming from a profound insecurity that masked itself as cunning, demonstrating how disowned internal fears can fuel covert, destructive aggression. In modern society, this manifests with heartbreaking frequency. Someone who fears their own inadequacy might subtly belittle others' achievements, dismiss their ideas, or engage in passive-aggressive sabotage, rather than confronting their own envy. An individual unwilling to admit their own fear of commitment might constantly create distance in relationships through inconsistent behavior, leaving others confused and hurt. Even in seemingly minor daily interactions, a sarcastic comment or a subtle eye roll can be a projection of one's own frustration or insecurity, draining the energy of the conversation and damaging the relationship. To overcome this insidious internal danger, begin by consciously identifying moments when your behavior becomes subtly aggressive or undermining. Ask, what insecurity or fear am I trying to protect myself from right now? Is my perceived superiority or veiled hostility actually a defense mechanism for my own vulnerability? Practice radical self-honesty, courageously acknowledging the feelings you usually deny. Engage in shadow work through journaling, mindful awareness, or therapy to explore the roots of these insecurities. This conscious reclamation of your projected aggression will transform it into self-awareness, fostering genuine connection rather than destructive patterns. The third shadow principle, often leading to profound stagnation and unlived potential, is the principle of the comfort zone of self-sabotage. This posits that certain unacceptable behaviors, despite their detrimental effects, are unconsciously maintained because they serve as a perverse form of comfort or provide a familiar, albeit limiting, sense of predictability. This is not about active malice, but about a deep-seated resistance to change, growth, or the discomfort of venturing into the unknown. The individual unconsciously tolerates these behaviors because the alternative confronting the discomfort of growth feels more threatening than the familiar pain of self-sabotage. This deep-seated principle is closely linked to Jung's concept of the pure puella aeternis archetype when it manifests as a resistance to adult responsibility or transformation. It is the ego's fear of the unfamiliar, even if the familiar is detrimental. Consider the myth of Sisyphus, eternally pushing his boulder up the hill only for it to roll back down. While a punishment, psychologically, it symbolizes a pattern of repetitive, unfulfilling effort born from an inability to break free from a cycle. An individual who consistently procrastinates on important goals, starts projects but never finishes them, or repeatedly falls back into unhealthy habits, is often unconsciously seeking the comfort of the familiar struggle, rather than risking the unknown territory of success and change. In modern society, this manifests profoundly in various contexts. Someone might perpetually delay important tasks, causing stress and missed opportunities because the act of starting feels overwhelming, and the familiar panic of the deadline becomes a perverse motivator. An individual might repeatedly return to dysfunctional relationships, despite consciously desiring healthy ones, because the familiar patterns, however painful, are less terrifying than the uncertainty of a new dynamic. Even in physical health, someone might repeatedly fall off their diet or exercise routine, finding comfort in the familiar cycle of indulgence and regret, rather than embracing the sustained effort required for genuine well-being. If you're finding this profound exploration of internal behaviors to be insightful and believe this message resonates with your quest for deeper self-awareness and personal integrity, subscribe to the channel and enable notifications so you don't miss any content that will further empower your journey towards self-mastery. If you feel a persistent yearning to truly comprehend the hidden forces that undermine your potential, to finally move beyond unconscious patterns and cultivate a life of profound authenticity and grounded presence, know that this inner calling is not a fantasy. It's your authentic self preparing for a profound liberation, a reclaiming of inherent sovereignty, and a truly integrated psyche. There are potent principles and practices that can illuminate this path of autonomy and self-affirmation, empowering you to live with an unshakable clarity and a profound sense of purpose. In the pinned comment, we have made available resources that were carefully crafted for souls like yours, ready to experience their most profound personal revolution. We have begun to unveil the profound truths about the unacceptable behaviors you tolerate in yourself, moving beyond external blame to the insidious perils of the unintegrated psyche. You've seen how the shadows, permissive zone, projected insecurity, and the comfort of self-sabotage can silently undermine your life, erode your relationships, and lead to profound suffering. But these are merely the foundational insights. Now, we delve into the more complex, yet equally vital, principles that, once understood, unlock even deeper levels of personal freedom and wisdom, allowing you to cultivate an uncompromising commitment to your highest self. The coming insights are not for the faint of heart. They require a courageous willingness to confront the deepest aspects of your own being. The fourth principle, often camouflaged by a narrative of realism, is the principle of the unacknowledged inner tyrant. This posits that an unacceptable behavior we tolerate in ourselves is often driven by a harsh, perfectionistic, or critical inner voice, an inner tyrant that sets impossible standards, punishes perceived failures, and fosters a deep sense of unworthiness. Ironically, the very behavior we tolerate, for example, procrastination, avoidance, or self-sabotage, can be a subconscious rebellion against this internal dictator, or a way to stay safe by never risking true failure. The danger lies in being ruled by this inner voice, which leads to chronic anxiety, self-criticism, and a pervasive sense of never being good enough. This perspective challenges the common tendency to view self-criticism as beneficial, emphasizing its potential for psychological tyranny. It is intimately tied to Jung's concept of the shadow of the judge, or persecutor archetype when internalized and operating unconsciously. The unacceptable behavior then becomes a symptom of this internal battle. Consider the literary archetype of the individual haunted by their own inner demons, perpetually tormented by self-recrimination and an inability to meet their own impossible standards. Their inability to escape this inner torment leads to self-destructive patterns, demonstrating the profound danger of an unacknowledged and tyrannical inner voice. This profound principle plays out in myriad ways in contemporary life, often unnoticed. Someone might endlessly strive for perfection, leading to burnout and chronic anxiety, and when they inevitably fall short, they tolerate harsh self-criticism, believing it motivates them, when in fact it paralyzes them. An individual might procrastinate excessively on a task because their inner tyrant demands flawless execution, making the task feel insurmountable. Even in seemingly minor daily choices, a persistent self-deprecating humor or a constant feeling of inadequacy indicates the presence of an inner tyrant that tolerates unacceptable levels of self-punishment, hindering genuine self-acceptance. To embrace the principle of the unacknowledged inner tyrant, cultivate radical self-compassion and differentiate yourself from that harsh inner voice. When you experience self-critical thoughts or an urge to engage in self-defeating behavior, pause and ask, whose voice is this, truly? Is it a loving, guiding voice, or a harsh, tyrannical one? Begin to consciously challenge and disidentify from this inner critic, replacing its harsh commands with gentle encouragement and realistic expectations. Practice acts of self-forgiveness and self-acceptance, recognizing that your worth is inherent, not conditional on perfection. This conscious act of dismantling the inner tyrant will liberate you from its oppressive grip, fostering genuine self-kindness and productive action. Finally, we encounter the most profound and often the most resistant shadow principle, the principle of the unexamined secondary gain. This posits that every unacceptable behavior we tolerate in ourselves, however detrimental it may appear on the surface, provides an unconscious secondary gain, a hidden benefit or payoff that reinforces its continuation. This might be attention, avoidance of responsibility, a sense of control, an excuse for not moving forward, or a twisted form of comfort. The danger lies in this unconscious payoff, which powerfully reinforces the behavior, making it incredibly difficult to stop until the hidden benefit is brought into conscious awareness and addressed. This intricate principle transcends mere habit and touches upon the profound cunning of the unconscious mind to maintain a perceived equilibrium, even if unhealthy. It is the ultimate challenge in personal transformation, as the ego resists giving up a known, albeit problematic, benefit. Jung's work on complexes and their ability to draw energy is highly relevant here, as the unacceptable behavior is often serving a deeper, unacknowledged need within the complex. Consider the figure of the ailing monarch in narratives, who, despite their suffering, unconsciously benefits from the attention, sympathy, or power their illness brings. making them resistant to genuine healing. Their ailment, though seemingly undesirable, provides a secondary gain that is difficult to relinquish. This manifests in countless ways in contemporary life, often leaving individuals bewildered by their own inability to change. Someone might perpetually complain about their problems, gaining sympathy and attention, secondary gain, which subtly reinforces their victim role and prevents them from seeking solutions. An individual might consistently procrastinate on a demanding task, avoiding the discomfort of challenging work, secondary gain, which maintains a false sense of freedom. Even in addiction, the immediate relief or escape, secondary gain, outweighs the long-term negative consequences, making the behavior incredibly difficult to cease. To fully integrate the principle of the unexamined secondary gain, cultivate radical honesty about the hidden benefits your unacceptable behaviors provide. When you find yourself tolerating a detrimental pattern, pause and ask, what am I getting from this behavior? What painful truth or uncomfortable responsibility am I avoiding by continuing this? Be mercilessly honest with yourself about the unconscious payoffs, however uncomfortable the realization. Once identified, consciously seek healthier, more constructive ways to meet those underlying needs, thereby dissolving the secondary gain and dismantling the behavior's unconscious power. This conscious act of revealing and addressing the hidden payoff is the ultimate key to breaking free from the most stubborn, self-sabotaging patterns. In the comments below, share which of these 5 principles of tolerated unacceptable behaviors resonates most deeply with your own experience, and what small, actionable step you plan to take this week to begin addressing it. If this deep exploration of inner integrity and the profound journey of self-mastery speaks to your soul, subscribe to the channel to continue unlocking the intricate secrets of the human psyche and cultivating a more profound understanding of true self-acceptance. Your like is a powerful affirmation that this knowledge holds true value, and a clear signal that this journey of inner transformation is one worth continuing together.